Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Virtual Hammer Museum, coming to you live from Los Angeles. I'm Claudia Bester, and I'm the Director of Hammer Public Programs, and I'm pleased to welcome you to today's Hammer Forum. The Hammer Forum is a series of public discussions about current social and political issues, and it's made possible with support from the Rosenbloom Family. Next week, we'll resume our mini-series on the upcoming California ballot measures that we're voting on next month, and our October 1st program will be about affirmative action, followed by an October 8th program on restoring voting rights to people on parole and ending cash bail. So I hope you'll all come back and join us for these important topics. And I apologize that we needed to shift the dates of those programs so we could make room for tonight's special program. Before we get started with the panel tonight, I have a few notes for the audience. This program is being conducted via Zoom webinar, and we'd love for you all to introduce yourselves in the chat box and tell us where you're tuning in from. The chat is also an area where you in the audience can all talk with each other. And the Q&A box is where you type in questions you have specifically for the panelists. We'll try to address as many questions as possible, but we have quite a large audience with us tonight, so we might not be able to get to everyone. But also please note that this program is being recorded and the full video will be available later on the Hammer website. So now on to tonight's program. We have four extraordinary women with us here tonight to talk about the legacy of the Honorable Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and also to discuss the battle going on right now as we speak in the United States Senate over naming her replacement. All four of our speakers would probably agree that through her lifelong, brilliant legal career, Ruth Bader Ginsburg's work has directly affected each of them and their lives and careers, and I know I feel that way too. So I'm just going to introduce them briefly and we can begin the program. U.S. Senator Barbara Boxer served 24 years in the United States Senate, 10 years in the House, and 6 years on the Marin County Board of Supervisors. Throughout her career, she's been a forceful advocate for families, children, consumers, the environment, and her home state of California. A leading defender of a women's right to choose, Senator Boxer helped lead the floor fight for passage of the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. In the Senate, she's fought back against repeated attacks on women's health and a women's right to privacy. A national leader on environmental protection, Senator Boxer worked to secure more than 1 million acres of wilderness to protect California's natural heritage. And she's worked to protect California's coast from offshore oil drilling and fought to end the unethical use of human subjects in pesticide testing by federal agencies. Her service in the Senate included chairing the Environment and Public Works Committee, where she focused on environment and infrastructure. She was also a senior member on the Foreign Relations Committee, where she worked for global women's issues and for the successful use of soft power of diplomacy. And she also served as the top Democrat on the State Ethics Committee. A champion of quality public education, Senator Boxer wrote landmark legislation establishing the first ever federal funding for after-school programs, and her law now covers over 1 million children. Senator Boxer has written several books, and in her most recent one called The Art of Tough, her message is that every single one of us should be empowered to make life better for our communities through positive change in debate and government. Journalist Kimberly Atkins is a senior opinion writer at the Boston Globe and an MSNBC contributor. Previously, Atkins was the first Washington, D.C.-based news correspondent for Boston Public Radio, and she also served as the Washington bureau chief for the Boston Herald. She guest hosted C-SPAN's morning call-in show, Washington Journal, and was a Supreme Court reporter for Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly and its sister publications. She's appeared as a political commentator on a host of national and international networks, including CNN, Fox News, NBC News, PBS, NPR, Sky News, and Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Before launching her journalism career, Kimberly was a trial and appellate litigation attorney in Boston. She's a native of Michigan and a graduate of the Boston University School of Law and the Boston University College of Communication and the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. Journalist Linda Greenhouse was the Supreme Court correspondent for the New York Times for 30 years, from 1978 to 2008, during which time she won a Pulitzer Prize for her work. She continues to write a regular op-ed column for the Times on the Supreme Court and is now a senior research scholar at Yale Law School, where she's taught since 2009. Greenhouse is also the president of the American Philosophical Society, which is the country's oldest learned society, founded by Benjamin Franklin in 1743. She's the author of 5 books, including a biography of Supreme Court Justice Harry Blackmun, an analytical guide to the Supreme Court called the US Supreme Court, A Very Short Introduction, which is just out in a second edition. And most recently, she published a memoir called Just a Journalist. Greenhouse is a graduate of Radcliffe College at Harvard and of the Yale Law School, where she received a Master of Studies in Law degree. Our moderator tonight is Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson. Levinson studies the law of the political process, including election law and governance issues. Her work focuses on ethics, political corruption, voting rights, campaign finance, ballot initiatives, redistricting, term limits, and state budgets. She regularly appears as a legal and political expert on television and radio and in print. She's the host of the podcast Passing Judgment and has a weekly legal segment on NPR member station KCRW here in Los Angeles. She's also an op-ed contributor for NBC.com and the associate director of Loyola's Journalist Law School. Professor Levinson served as the president of the Los Angeles Ethics Commission until 2018. She's also the founding director of Loyola Law School's Public Service Institute, which is dedicated to creating the next generation of leaders in government service. So hello and welcome, Senator Barbara Boxer, Kimberly Atkins, Linda Greenhouse, and Jessica Levinson.
Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to wait a minute while we get Senator Boxer, Kimberly, and Linda, and here we all are. So I just want to say to the Hammer audience, we're so glad that you could join us. Obviously, we did not plan this panel a week ago. We had planned to talk about one of the ballot measures, and I think we're all feeling some collective grief and a collective questioning about what is going to happen next. And I truly can't think of a better panel to talk to us about that. So first, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Justice Ginsburg as a person, as an advocate, as a judge, and then we're going to move into what's happening in the Senate, what might happen, and what we can do going forward. So ladies, as we talked about in the virtual green room, I just want to start by going around the table. Senator Boxer, if it's okay, I'll start with you and ask, where were you when you heard the news that Justice Ginsburg had passed away?
Well, I was sitting with my daughter in our little great room there where we have the TV, watching Joy Reid. And Joy Reid said, "Oh, wait, we have some breaking news." And she announced it. And I just will tell you that my daughter screamed. She's in her 50s, okay? She screamed. And within 10 minutes, I got a call from my daughter-in-law who was sobbing, which says so much about what Ruth Bader Ginsburg meant to women of every age.
Linda, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, so this is quite a coincidence, Senator Boxer. So this was the first night of Rosh Hashanah, and my husband, daughter, and I'm on the East Coast, so it was 3 hours later. My husband, daughter, and I had just finished dinner, and the phone started to ring, and the phone call was from MSNBC, and this male voice said, "Given the news, can you come on and talk to Joy Reid?" I said, "What news?" He said, "Well, Justice Ginsburg had died." I said, "Oh my God." And it was a really weird feeling because 4 nights earlier, I had had a nightmare, a very vivid dream that she had died. And in my dream, I was crying. Everybody in my dream was crying. I woke up, I told my husband I had this horrible dream. So when I heard this in this odd way, I had this kind of deja vu, like, is it now? Is it 4 nights ago? Anyway, it was, my mind went totally blank for quite a few minutes.
And you have a wonderful piece in the paper today that I want to get to a little bit later as well. Kim, same question to you.
Yeah, so on Friday, I had actually, it had been a long week, and I had actually decided I was going to enjoy a dinner that was not plugged in. And so I was sitting at my table, I was eating, my television was off, and I did not turn off the ringer on my phone, which I actually had intended to do. And I heard my phone chime with a text message. And when I looked at it, it was from one of my very good friends, a law school classmate of mine, actually. And the text message just said expletive. I won't say which one. And I knew. I knew that what had happened, and I turned on the television to MSNBC, and I saw the news, and I just remember feeling numb and in disbelief, which may seem strange for someone who fought cancer 5 times, but it really was disbelief. And then soon after, my editor texted, and I began writing a series of pieces between that night and Saturday morning.
And I would recommend for the whole audience to read those pieces. They're really fine pieces. And somebody tweeted after, never have so many women collectively written the F word at the same time, texting their friends as when they heard the news. And so I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about Justice Ginsburg before she became the notorious RBG. So Linda, you're one of the nation's leading experts on the Supreme Court and on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I'm hoping that you can tell us a little bit about Ruth Bader Ginsburg before she became Judge Ginsburg, not just before she became Justice Ginsburg, but before she became Judge Ginsburg. And I think a lot of people know the broad outlines of her fight for gender equality, but I'm hoping you can fill that in for the audience a little bit.
Yeah, sure. And I'll just say, she didn't actually become the notorious RBG until she'd been on the Supreme Court for some years, and we'll discuss this later, I'm sure, but she didn't go on the court, oh, President Clinton has nominated the notorious RBG to the Supreme Court. So she started as a very young lawyer, she attended Harvard Law School, graduated from Columbia because she had to move to New York for her husband's job. Top of her class, couldn't get a job, couldn't get the clerkship she was recommended for, all that kind of stuff. I'll skip over a bunch of that and just say that she embarked on a litigation project with the American Civil Liberties Union to persuade the 9 men who sat on the Supreme Court of the United States to reinterpret the Constitution, the equal protection guarantee of the 14th Amendment, as having anything to do with women, anything to do with sex discrimination within the meaning of equal protection. And the very liberal Warren Court under Chief Justice Earl Warren had never gone there, So she had a vision, she had a strategy. In a way, she modeled herself after Thurgood Marshall, who eventually first became a Supreme Court justice, but he had run the civil rights litigation strategy for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And basically what it consisted of was doling out the arguments in small doses that the court could swallow. He didn't start with Brown against Board of Education. He started with, what's a law school doing not racially integrated, before he took it down to the elementary school level and so on. So she started with plaintiffs who were typically male, men who were being discriminated against under the law by laws that just assumed that it was the woman who was going to need some kind of federal help and the man was going to be the breadwinner. And so what she wanted to show the court was that sex equality isn't going to favor one or the other. It's going to wipe away these built-in assumptions about the roles that society has assigned to men or to women. And that was really her project. She didn't actually like the phrase women's rights. She wanted sex equality as was really her byword. And, we're, to the extent that we're not there yet, we're always a work in progress, but the females on this panel tonight are all her beneficiaries, as indeed we all are.
We absolutely are. And I always talk to my students about this, and I think it was so strategically brilliant that those early cases were laws that discriminated against men, as she educated all of us on what gender equality really means and who it harms, which is everybody. And let's fast forward a little bit. Kim, take us to now Justice Ginsburg. And I think a lot of people know, again, this, which Linda said so well, she wasn't the notorious RBG when she came on the Supreme Court. So can you tell us a little bit about who was she before she was on our mugs and our masks and our T-shirts? Who was she when she came from the DC Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court, and how would we describe her as a justice?
Yeah, I mean, when she was nominated, Bill Clinton wanted someone to be, I think he called her the female Thurgood Marshall when it came to civil rights and fighting for equality. So that was sort of the idea. But she was somebody who exceeded expectations from the beginning. When that vacancy that she filled became open, it was assumed that Stephen Breyer would get it. Stephen Breyer was in line, he was prepped, he was very close to Senator Edward Kennedy, who was number 2 on the Senate Judiciary Committee at that point. And he was suffering from, I think it was a broken collarbone. He had fallen in a bicycle accident. So when he met with Bill Clinton, he wasn't his best. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg went in and met with Bill Clinton and wowed him. And she won the nomination. And from that point on, she exceeded expectations. Her stature, the first time I ever met her, I got to speak to her. It was the second Supreme Court justice I ever spoke to. It was when I was a student at BU. And she came, my torts professor was one of her clerks, and he brought her in. And I was just so struck that even then, just a couple years into her tenure on the court, she was this tiny woman, but she had this just outsized presence and a very clear focus on what she wanted to do, was to use the Constitution and statutory interpretation to make sure that she could make that case for sex equality, as Linda said. And my first day covering the US Supreme Court many years later as a reporter, it was funny, it was marked by 2 things. One, the press room in the Supreme Court was in a little trailer because the court was being renovated. And I was trying to get in, and the security was stopping me because I didn't have the pass I needed, which was in the room, to get to the room. And I remember Linda Greenhouse, taking down the security guard that was stopping me and saying, "This is a public building and you let her in." And the other thing I remember about that day was, after years of not speaking in dissent from the bench, that would be the day that Ruth Bader Ginsburg would give the first in many bench dissents, which was in Gonzalez v. Carhartt, in which she gave a blistering dissent after the court upheld the federal partial birth abortion ban, really laying out that nothing had changed since Roe v. Wade or Casey except the makeup of the court. And really taking down Justice Anthony Kennedy's rationale that women needed to be protected from this procedure and the delicate state of pregnancy, and that no such thing was true. And so it was such a remarkable day. And since then, just weeks later, she gave the Ledbetter dissent, which led to the Ledbetter Act, President Obama's first piece of legislation that he signed. And from then on, that's really where the notorious RBG era began. And I was lucky enough to be there to see that start all the way through the end.
Linda, did you
could I elaborate just on something that Kim said when she said Justice Ginsburg exceeded expectations? So, people might ask, well, why? What does that mean? And she did all this stuff as a litigator. So I think it might be useful to know that during her years on the DC Circuit, the Court of Appeals, she did not cut a very large progressive figure. She was very friendly with judges who were obviously more conservative than she. One of them was the future Justice Scalia. Another was the Robert Bork. And she adopted a very kind of moderate jurisprudence. She was by no means, she certainly wasn't the most liberal woman on the Supreme Court. That was on the DC Circuit. That was Patricia Wald. So some of the feminist groups were not actually, they all ended up in the Rose Garden when President Clinton presented her. They were all there. But the kind of talk beforehand was they were not in her corner. They didn't quite trust her to carry the spear. And so to that extent, they were wrong.
And yeah, I want to get to Senator Boxer. I just wanted to point out, and Kim and Linda, you both kind of said this, which is when Justice Ginsburg was nominated, I remember headlines, moderate jurists nominated.
Yeah.
And one of the things you brought up, Kim, is that how much did Justice Ginsburg change, and how much did, as she pointed out in that dissent, the court kind of shift from under her feet. And hopefully we'll have time to loop back to that, because I think it is an important distinction for, where we are going with this court. But Senator Boxer, you told me something that I hadn't known, which is that your first confirmation vote was for Justice Ginsburg. And I know that you were also in the Senate when Justice Scalia passed away and there was a vacancy. And President Obama, of course, tried to fill that vacancy with Merrick Garland. And I'm hoping you can describe for the audience a little bit about what it was like to be in the Senate while that was happening and how you think it compares to the current moment.
Okay, but I have to say that when Ruth Bader Ginsburg came to my office after she was nominated, I'm 5 feet tall and she's 5 feet tall. So first of all, I loved her right away because we could look eye to eye. That was great. But the woman was so humble and so soft-spoken. We both were born in Brooklyn, and I was, my usual chatty Kathy self. And she was just so humble, and I never forget it. I loved her. And I'm going to get to your very important question, but I think our audience will appreciate the stories. Yeah. Barbara Mikulski started a tradition that the women senators would have dinner with the female justices of the court. And we did that I think it must have been every few months or so. So it started off, it was just Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and then they added the others. And we would all have dinner together, and it was very special because it would be over there at the court, and they all would just let their guard down, and we would laugh and have a good time. And the whole point that people would be stunned at her passing, as we all were, and my kids would cry at her passing. And I think that Kimberly made the point. I mean, here she had fought cancer over and over and over and over and over. And we all knew intellectually that this was a tough thing for her to battle through. And yet, when she did succumb, she was one of these people, such an icon and so strong, right? Inner strength, very fragile, but inner strength. So I just have to show that I gave all my memorabilia away, except I kept her and Rosie the Riveter, because I want to pass by her every day to remember. What made her powerful is she suffered the slings and arrows of discrimination, just as those in the streets today we see fighting so hard because they know if they have a son, and his skin is black, will he come home? I mean, she suffered those slings and arrows. I did my age. I was, maybe 8 years behind her. But getting to your question about Garland, did I go on too long?
No, I'm really happy that, how no member of the audience would have otherwise had the experience of meeting with Justice Ginsburg before her confirmation hearing. So I'm grateful that you shared that.
Oh, good. And the fact that she called and said, it's my 50th wedding anniversary. Can you please arrange a tour in Napa Valley because Marty deserves it. The sweetest thing ever, ever, ever. But here's what happened with Merrick Garland. There were 8 months to go. Justice Scalia passed away. And at that time, we needed 60 votes and to get a confirmation through. And before Mitch McConnell ended that. And we had this very consensus candidate everyone thought was excellent. And the Republicans said no. And not only did they say no, they said, we will never, ever, ever, ever consider voting for a justice in an election year. And they said, get me on tape. I'm going down on the record. This is the biggest betrayal I've ever seen, this particular situation we're in now. And I want to say this as someone who served for 24 years in the United States Senate. And if I hadn't had Republican support, I couldn't have passed things, 1,000 things, okay? And now we're at a point where the Republicans have gone against exactly what they said. And I don't know whether this thing is going to go through or not, but I just want to say this, and I say this to everyone within the sound of my voice. It's hard to understand institutions that you work at. The court's an institution, the House is an institution, the Senate's an institution, the museum's an institution, everybody functions, a newspaper room is an institution, etc. The Senate, if you look a senator in the eye and you say, I will never vote to confirm anyone in an election year, and you go back, that is the biggest betrayal. It kind of threw literally a torch into the Senate floor. I think everything's on the table and it's a mess right now, to be honest.
We certainly want to loop back to what's going to happen and what we can do about it. All three of you have in different ways mentioned how powerful Senator Ginsburg is. And Senator Boxer, we can join virtual hands. I am also a member of the knocking on almost 5'2.5" club. But I want to go back to you, Linda, to talk about something we discussed in the green room, which is, we have this issue, we have this idea that we keep saying Justice Ginsburg was small, but she was so mighty. And I think some of that is because of what we talked about, that she had to persevere against discrimination. A man with her credentials, can you imagine how many judges and law firms would have been falling all over themselves to give her an offer? And I think part of how she becomes so strong and powerful may also be part of the story of something that I know you wanted to talk about, Linda, which is why she didn't step down. That maybe the same personality who says, I'm going to persevere through this, will not be ushered off the court. So with that, Linda, could you tell us a little bit? I know you and Kim want to talk about this.
Yeah, I had suggested to Jessica early that it's something we needed to talk about because people are talking about it. You know, why didn't she retire? Why are we in this situation? And I pushed back against that. I pushed back against it when a kind of a male cabal of law professors rather early in the Obama years had said Ruth Ginsburg should retire. And frankly, I thought that was a sexist deal. You little lady, it's your responsibility to give up a job you love and at which you're pretty darn good and take a bullet for our side and leave. The notion that the political death spiral that our country seems to be in right this minute should be laid at the feet of Ruth Bader Ginsburg is a little bit out of context, I think. She made a judgment that, she beat back these various medical issues that she had. She was going, as she would say, a full bore. And had she taken that advice in the early Obama years, we would have been without her for a decade. And just speaking for myself, I think that would have been a real loss. And so, just as John Paul Stevens stayed until he was 90, I didn't hear a big chorus saying, hey, John Paul, time for you to go. I've said enough about that, but I just find there's kind of a male-female divide in this. And I think that's for a reason. So I'd be very interested in what Kim thinks.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I don't think that the same thing would have been said. I mean, yes, Justice Stevens was Republican appointed, but by then he was, advocating for abolishing the death penalty and such. He was clearly a solid left-leaning member of the court, and you did not see that same clamoring for her. And Linda's right. I mean, think about, as we were saying, the notorious RBG era, much of it took place after that, and it was her will, it was her choice to continue on the court. She wanted to continue, and she certainly left a mark there. But what was remarkable about it too was the show of her strength? You know, was it in part to sort of tamp down naysayers, or was it just because that was the type of justice she was? But, you know, I remember being shocked that she was on the bench at work just days after she lost her husband. She was on the bench at work after the first cancer diagnosis, after the second cancer diagnosis, after the third cancer diagnosis, while she was going through chemotherapy. I remember saying to my editor, you know, I feel bad now for calling in last week when I had, you know, a cough, because there's Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the court. You know, she's showing reporters her workout on camera. I mean, it was that sort of spirit, that sort of show that she can do anything, that was a part of what she was writing about in her decisions and in her, you know, often her dissents about equality, about what it means to what feminism looks like, what a working woman looks like. I liked in her speeches when she would talk about the fact that, yeah, she was denied, she didn't get a job offer after graduating first in her class from law school, and all the discrimination she faced, but also as a working lawyer when she was a mother. One of the speeches one of the things she said frequently in speeches was how when a school would call about something happening with their kids, they always called her, and she would tell them, this child has two parents, so next time call his father. She really explained how, through her own life, discrimination looks like. I mean, even in that Ledbetter decision, you can tell she was counting on her own personal experiences when she said, nobody announces that they're going to pay you less. Of course they're going to hide it. And so to say, because you didn't know, you can't bring a claim makes no sense. It's only reinforcing that discrimination. So, hey, Congress, it's time for you to step in because we courts can't. She was always drawing on her personal experience to do that. And I think that came through more and more the longer she was on the bench.
Can I jump in? I want to jump in here because I thought this was so wonderful to listen to. And it's interesting because how many people in the Congress wanted Nancy Pelosi to step down this last time? Think about it.
Correct. Yes.
Now, I was there for Tip O'Neill. I mean, he was old before he was old. I mean, nobody ever talked about that. And Nancy, she's another one, you know, she just basically said, look, I started later. I raised I think 5 kids, and then I got into politics, and I have a few more good years. And I would say, just because I'm such a strong supporter of hers, we need her experience right now. So I think it is something that gets handed to women. We're the ones who are supposed to take it for the team. I also think the point Kimberly makes about the fact that Ruth had experienced so much of this discrimination, as I did, just as a factor of my age. And, you know, it stings forever. And it gives you an authenticity that, you know, that people feel. They feel it. They know, you know, what you're talking about. The last point I'd make is about Lilly Ledbetter because of Ruth. When we lost that case at the court, we just were down. And the women in the Senate were like, oh my God, how could this happen? But because of Ruth's clarion call to Congress, we were there, and Lilly came to us. And some of my favorite photographs are with Lilly. And we won that. And Barack Obama, our first Black president, equal pay for equal work, first thing. And, you know, I said last thing, but there's one more thing I want to say about pushing people out and what would have been and coulda, shoulda, woulda, blah, blah, blah. We don't know who would have taken the seat. We have no idea. But here's the point. And we don't know this because fate is, you know, you can't predict what could happen. Maybe the fact that she was taken from us at this moment, just maybe, is going to get enough people who were thinking, oh, well, another election, this is another one where everything's at stake. So you don't know the impact of her loss, what it could mean.
Yeah, and this brings up the impact of her loss. I mean, a number of people have said some iteration of something's wrong with our institutions when so much and so many rights hang on one person. And I think that's why, Kimberly, you talked about the fact that we were so used to her coming back. And, her husband passes away. She's back on the bench 14 hours later. She has bouts with cancer. She's back on the bench. I think for a lot of people, that's why it was not surprising and utterly shocking at the same time. But Linda, I wanted to bring you in to talk about this idea of, it's not just that we lost her as a person, it's again, this idea that so much hung on her, so many of our rights were dependent on her. And I wanted to ask you, and then Kim next, for lack of a better way of asking this, is given what happened in 2016, given what's, I believe, going to happen before Halloween, is our Supreme Court broken? Or is our process broken?
Is the Supreme Court broke? Well, I mean, the Senate is certainly doing its part to break it. I mean, it looks like the Senate Republicans will get away with the ploy they're about to impose on the court. And, what's the public supposed to think of that? I mean, this may sound crazy, but if I were one of the 3 or 4 or 5 women who were under consideration to get the nomination, and I had any self-respect, I would say, thank you, Mr. President, but I'm not going to be a party to this. Thank you very much. Now, obviously, I'm not that naive to think that any of them would do that. But, this moment finds the court in a very unusual and perilous situation. It was in before Ruth Ginsburg died. And that is that the ideology of the sitting justices, for the first time in modern American history, maps completely onto the partisan identification of the president who appointed them. So 5 conservatives on the court, all Republican appointees, 4 liberals on the court, which included Ruth Ginsburg, all Democratic appointees. So there was no crossover. Once Justice Stevens and Justice Souter, 2 Republican appointees who became in their time, very much on the liberal side of the court, once they retired, the public could look at the court and could be forgiven for seeing politicians in robes, although that's unfair to the individual justices for the most part. That's certainly not their intention, but the court's viability, if you will, depends on the public perceiving it as a court, as a body of serious-minded people who are there to interpret the law and not to carry water for the team that brought them. And I think that's going to be very hard to maintain that way of thinking if this goes through, because it was getting to be hard anyway.
One thing I try and talk to my students about is that conservative legal thought doesn't always map directly onto a Republican political win, but I feel like it's becoming harder and harder at times for our students to see that. And Kim, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I think I want to go, same question for you in terms of, are you worried about the Supreme Court as an institution? I mean, Linda says, the thing that we should all know, which is they don't have an army behind them, right? Their legitimacy depends on us saying your pen makes a difference. We will respect that.
Yes, and I think, the question about it being broken in the process, that, the Senate process is different than the court process and the court in itself as an institution, but it's a valid point. And it's something that has been a long time in coming, I think. I don't think that it's just happened in the last couple of years. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was confirmed 96-3. Yes, she was, for all the talk about her being a moderate, she was an ACLU lawyer. They knew, I think they had a pretty good idea. The Republicans on the Senate at that time had a pretty good idea. Antonin Scalia was confirmed unanimously. I don't think that will ever happen again. And, and that breakdown by party began after the Thomas confirmation, which was the closest in history until the Kavanaugh confirmation. So I think there is that the politicization of the Senate has spilled over necessarily in the politicization of the court in a way that is unfortunate. And now, especially now, you have presidents who are incentivized to find the youngest and the most ideologically pure nominee that they can possibly find that the filibuster was, ended in between that too. And that has there was a time that when it was time for a president to pick a Supreme Court justice, they would talk to members of the Senate. Senator Boxer knows this. They would go to the Senate and talk to them and say, do you have ideas? Who would you like to see? Give me some candidates. I will consider all these people and then I will talk to you about them in an effort to get that kind of consensus candidate. I think Barack Obama tried that with Merrick Garland. There are many who argued that wasn't the time to try it, but that is one reason why perhaps we didn't see the groundswell, at least from voters. That was an election year too. We didn't see the groundswell of voters concerned about the Supreme Court, even when a justice was being held, that we see right now when the outcome is almost assured to be very different. And so, yes, one has spilled over to another. And so I think that's a question, finally, I'll say, that's a question for John Roberts. John Roberts, who is very concerned about the court as an institution. And you see that in rulings that he has made from the Obamacare decisions, the multiple times upholding Obamacare, to the most recent Census Bureau decision, where he essentially said, look, the administration can add census questions to the census, but this one was so patently, like bold-facedly a lie. I can't let this go. With a 6-3 court, that's going to be harder for him to do, but he can still try to do that. He can still try to protect the court as an institution and to show that it is not a political vehicle now. But it becomes much harder when you have 6-3, especially when you have very 6 staunch conservatives versus 3 liberals.
I had the feeling at the end of last term that Chief Justice John Roberts is holding the Supreme Court together with, paper clips and rubber bands and gum.
MacGyver style, yes.
Yeah, and he's saying to the Trump administration, you can do this, but just don't come and be so sloppy about it. And I think that's how we saw a number of those decisions play out. And I think for the reasons that you both said, we probably don't see another Souter and Breyer, because now the name of the game is how young are you, how proven, are you to be conservative? There's a lot of questions about court packing, but I want to be mindful of Senator Boxer's time. And I did see you on mute. So Senator Boxer, did you want to weigh in for a moment?
Yeah, I do, because look, the Senate is the one that decides. So let's spend a minute on the senators. And what happened, and when it started to really break down, was when Barack Obama couldn't get any judges through whatsoever. And there were vacancies and for lower courts. Could not get anything through. It was unbelievable. And so with a lot of difficulty, Democrats decided to do away with the filibuster for the lower courts. And they wanted to do it for the Supremes. And I was one of the people who said to Harry Reid, please don't do it away. Don't do away with it for either legislation or the Supreme Court. Because the deal is, if you're looking at an institution like the court, when I was there in those beautiful days when the president was so excited about coming up with a nominee, and he, the president, we never had a she, would escort that nominee around the whole Senate and to the Republicans, to the Democrats, regardless of party. That's how it was. And you needed 60. Now you don't need it anymore because Mitch McConnell did away with it. So what you have is a broken down institution in the Senate now, which, because of what I said before, and I'm going to reiterate it, they threw a torch into the Senate floor when they said, oh, this time we're going to move ahead, even though we said a few months ago, 18 months ago, we would never move forward in an election year. I don't want people to misconstrue this. This is a big, big deal. So the filibuster is gone for Supreme Court, so there doesn't have to be bipartisanship, right? The, Ruth is gone. And I will say, I'm so happy that Kimberly talked about John Roberts for a moment, because he did surprise me a few times. And, maybe he can influence somebody. But this, I'm not at all certain, as Linda is, and I hope that I'm right and she's not right. The chances are she's right and I'm not. But I'm hoping that this whole thing isn't a fait accompli, because there's a lot of senators who were running who have to face the fact that they looked out and said, never a Supreme Court justice in an election year, and now they've changed their mind. And maybe they'll get scared about it. We've got 2 so far. We need 2 more. There might be a slim chance of that.
Linda, Kimberly, I was going to go back to you, but I hope you'll wait for a moment. Senator Boxer, you just brought up kind of what I wanted to end with, but let's talk about it now. So very clearly what happens February 2016, Justice Antonin Scalia passes away. Again, February, 9.5 months before the election, President Obama says, here's Merrick Garland. Senator Mitch McConnell says, absolutely not. September 2020, it's not before an election, we're in an election. People have already turned in ballots. People have already gone to early polling places. Ruth Bader Ginsburg passes away. President Trump says, I'm nominating somebody by Saturday. Senator Mitch McConnell says, without any delay, we will have confirmation hearings. Could you walk the audience through how Senator McConnell has tried to say that these 2 situations are different and whether or not that holds any water?
Are you asking me?
Yes, Senator Boxer.
Okay. Yeah, well, what he said is, it's different because now the president is the same party as the majority in the Senate. Huh? I mean, maybe he could have said it's because I think my eye is blue. I don't know. It makes no sense. So that's what they're trying to say. And it doesn't add up. Again, there were no caveats. They said in an election year, that's it. And now he's saying, well, it was different because there was a Democrat and there was a, makes no sense. Somebody else said, oh, it's the first term, not the second term. Again, huh? So they can twist themselves into pretzels to try and rationalize this, but it's a bald-faced, double-dealing, hypocritical move. And if I was still in the Senate, I would not be allowed to say those words.
Well, we're glad you're here with us instead. And it is, it doesn't feel like tortured logic. It feels like no logic at all. If you are elected for 4 years, it's not the first 3 years to appoint federal judges and then 4 years for everything else. Senator, so I think, ladies, let's plan on this. I want to ask Senator Boxer, since we're already in this theme, of what can we do? And then Kim and Linda, I want to end with talking a little bit more about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because I do think a lot of the audience members are here for her. And then we will take questions and you will cycle off when you need to. So Senator, and thank you for your patience. Senator Boxer, what can Democrats or Republicans who may not agree with these tactics do going forward? As you said, the filibuster is gone. There are 53 Republicans in the Senate. You need 51 to confirm a Supreme Court justice. Do the Democrats have any moves left on the dance floor here?
Well, the one way to stop this, really, only one practical way, because everything else would just delay, is to get those 4 votes. We have 2, we need 2 more. So any Democrats in states like Iowa, Arizona, North Carolina, South Carolina, where your senator is up. I mean, if you know people in those states, they need to make senators pay a price for this. And I think, what to me is so important is not to get 100% distracted with this and take your eye off getting to the polls. It's very, very nerve-wracking for me to think about that. So what you have to do is understand this can all be made better, because as Chuck Schumer has said, everything will be on the table if we do take the Senate, if we do take the White House and keep the House. So in our system, that's the bottom line. That's the power we have. But I do think if you have anyone in these states where senators, Republican senators, who have become hypocrites because you have their words, and I've mentioned some of their names, Grassley's another one, you know, go after them and just say to them, look, you may give up your seat. Do you really want to give up your seat? Most senators don't want to lose. I'll tell you, I've been there. It's not good to lose. So make it something that's an election year issue, but don't keep your eye on the prize, which is getting people to vote out, you know, this president who has no respect for the people of this country, for the court as an institution, and for equality.
I'm glad that you said that and that we got that in. And I certainly don't think the audience wanted to leave before we talked about, you know, what comes next and where's our political power at the end of this. And I do want to end, as I said, before we get to Q&A, with Linda, could you tell us a little bit about how that, Kim already started the conversation, but I want to get back to Justice Ginsburg because I think a lot of people are here to hear about her. Could you talk to us a little bit about that transformation from, as Kim said, exceeding expectations to the beginning to our little, you know, is your daughter going to dress like Ruth Bader Ginsburg for Halloween? How do we see this arc where she really becomes a pop culture icon? And, you know, Chief Justice John Roberts famously says, I'm glad I could be here to introduce Justice Ginsburg and raise her profile.
Well, what happened at the beginning of 2006 is that Sandra Day O'Connor, of course, the first woman on the court, retired. And that not only left Ruth Ginsburg as the only female justice, but left her having to deal with Justice O'Connor's replacement, Justice Sam Alito, much further to the right, a hard right. And his arrival made an immediate difference. Kim had mentioned earlier the Carhartt abortion case. So this was a case where 5 or 6 years earlier, with Justice O'Connor in the majority, the court had struck down a state law that made it a crime to perform an abortion by this particular technique, so-called partial birth abortion, a phony label. But Alito comes on the court. The case comes back because this time it's a federal statute, but it's the exact same issue in terms of interpreting the right to abortion. And you substitute Alito for O'Connor, and it goes 5-4 the other way. And as Kim said, in her dissent, Justice O'Connor really pushed the envelope a little bit for judicial speech and kind of called that fact out. There's nothing different except the makeup of the court. And that was the term of Ledbetter, and it went on because she's been quoted as saying, that was the worst of times to be the one woman on the court. She would say, you know, here I am, this little woman, you know, sitting on the bench surrounded by these guys. And so her dissenting opinions went on. Another famous one was the Shelby County case, the case where the court by a 5-4 majority cut the heart out of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And she wrote a very strong dissent there. And so, you know, this body of work shifted from the opinions that she wrote when she was able to write majority opinions, like in the Virginia military case where the court struck down and the vote there was 7-1. It was only Justice Scalia dissenting. Justice Clarence Thomas didn't vote in that case, said that the all-male Virginia Military Institute state-supported school violated the Constitution. She did her work as a writer of majority opinions, and now her voice was in dissent. And so when a couple of young people attached the notorious RBG, you know, rap music inflected label on her, and it kind of took off, and people started writing books for children, books for young girls, using Ruth Ginsburg as a role model. you know, I'm old enough that I didn't meet a woman who was a lawyer until I graduated from college. I saw no role models, but here are little girls growing up to see this, you know, it's quite an amazing thing. And so in the internet age, which of course it was not when she was first on the court, it just grew and grew. And that became an essential part of her legacy, the speaking truth to power, the voice in dissent when it was really needed and is still needed.
And can I add a point to that?
Please.
She was influential on the court. I mean, after that, when there were two other women who joined her on the court to give it its record number of 3, we saw some of the most passionate bench dissents given by Justice Sotomayor in affirmative action cases. We saw just last term, Elena Kagan gave a powerful bench dissent in the redistricting case. This sort of has become an infectious sort of tool that the women in particular on the court have used in these cases to really highlight what was being done in these cases, knowing that just having the written opinion there would not get the same kind of attention from the nation and from Congress as having these very strong bench dissents. So, you know, Ginsburg famously said, when asked how many women on the court is enough, she said 9. And she said, well, you know, there were 9 men for a long time and nobody ever spoke against that. So why can't there be 9 women? And I think she certainly had an impact on the other women of the court.
I think I want to end doing before Q&A, but end the formal session with what we did in the beginning, which is to go around and ask all of you a question. Senator Boxer, I'll start with you. What can we do to best honor Justice Ginsburg's memory and her legacy? What are some steps that everybody who's listening can take?
Well, what I say is we have to step up in our lives. You know, when we lose someone, you know, it's like when I grew up, the first time I realized I was a grown-up, which unfortunately for me was not until I was about 30. I always thought somebody else would do something, you know, and all of a sudden I think, there's some injustice, there's some bad thing. And I look behind me and think, I got to do it. And, you know, this word equality, this word is a beautiful word. This was her life's passion. And as you pointed out in the beginning, Linda, she was so smart the way she proved the point by saying there has to be equality for men and women, where, you know, it's good for everybody. It's good for everybody, whoever you love, whatever you look like, whatever your background, whatever your zip code. And we need to stand up to that fight. We have to now. And it means doing more than you thought you'd have to do, not just sitting around and thinking about it, but saying something about it, doing something about it, whether it's through your voice or your vote or, you know, whatever influence you have. And in closing, I would say, this election is, it's about exactly what she fought for. And because if you take that word equality and you look at our life and what's happening to people who still are left behind because they don't have equal access to healthcare and to good jobs and good education, and you realize that's what she fought for. So all of us better vote and better understand what's at stake. A lot of people use an excuse. Oh, there's no one perfect running. Of course, there's no one perfect running. The only perfect person running would be you yourself. You would agree with yourself all the time, but that's not what we have. We have a representative government. So think about this election and do it for Ruth. I really mean that.
Linda, can I ask you the same question? If you think there's one way that audience members, what would she be happy with us doing going forward? What would make Justice Ginsburg happy?
Well, I might broaden the frame just a little bit and say, you know, look at the year we've been having in the United States in 2020 and the great, you know, reckoning about racial justice that's come about in these months. And, you know, really what she was standing for was the dignity of all people, regardless of gender, and what this great reckoning moment has told us this year is that nothing's more important in society, in a democratic society, than to recognize the dignity of all people, regardless of all the aspects that seem to make us different on the surface one to the other, whether it's race or ethnicity or gender. And so I think, you know, there's a kind of seamless web of all of this. And I think we have to keep our eyes on that ball. We have to raise our children to take this seriously and to be active members of the democratic polity. And, you know, our generation, we've done our best, and it's turned out with a lot of unfinished business. And I have a daughter who's in her 30s, and all of her friends are very energized and going to be active. And I think that's where my hope lies.
Kim, and then I think we have to say goodbye to Senator Boxer.
Yeah, I'm going to stay on the same theme as the senator and Linda and say, I think about Justice Ginsburg's dissent in Shelby County, which Linda mentioned, and she talked about the importance of protecting the vote and really scolded Chief Justice John Roberts for his famous saying that the way to end racial injustice is just to end racial injustice, or they end, you know, decisions based on race by ending decisions based on race. And she said, you know, if it's raining outside and you're under an umbrella and you're dry, do you throw away the umbrella? That's what gutting the VRA was essentially doing. And I have always been aware that it has taken not one, but two constitutional amendments to ensure my right to vote, as well as, and that wasn't enough. It was also a lot of work and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and people literally giving their lives for that right. And so the fact that I live in Virginia, in what was a pre-clearance part of the country, all of this is not lost on me. So I think the importance of voting, whether it's a special election for a local school board or whether it's the presidential election, casting a vote in every single election is crucially important for a number of reasons, including for all the reasons that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg laid out in her dissent in Shelby County.
Senator Boxer, I know you have to go, but I saw you unmute. Do you want to close quickly, and then I'll ask the other ladies to stay for a few more questions?
I just want to thank you for giving me this chance to be on this magnificent panel. I learned so much from them. And of course, it gave me a chance to vent, which I appreciate because, you know, it's wonderful to be able to have an audience to talk to about what you're thinking and feeling after all the years I spent in that Senate, and then to see what is happening now. But it breaks my heart. And so thanks for this opportunity. And I'd love to see you again in one of these wonderful formats. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Boxer. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. You weren't reading the comments, but everybody appreciated it too.
Oh, thank you. Bye.
Kim and Linda, it's just us, and we have some great comments that I tried to put into a couple of buckets. Obviously, and I will direct this, maybe Linda, you could start, but Kim, I hope you'll answer as well. And it's something I've been hearing from my female students since, you know, about 5:15 Pacific time on Friday night, which is what's going to happen to Roe versus Wade, which I think is a kind of general way of asking a more specific question, which is what's going to happen to my right to have access to reproductive rights.
Yeah, well, if one of these would-be Trump nominees ends up sitting on the court, I think the right to abortion as a constitutional matter may well be over. So then we'll be back to where we were in the pre-Roe days, where women with money and access could find their way to a safe abortion, and other women can't. And it's a very tragic situation. The one bright spot, I read a very interesting article now. I can't exactly remember where it was, because obviously things to read are just filling up all of our inboxes, but it said the best thing we can hope is Democrats take the White House, Democrats take the Senate. There's a lot that, and the Democrats get rid of the legislative filibuster, just like the Republicans got rid of the judicial filibuster for the Supreme Court. Could pass a lot of important legislation. You could pass, Barbara Boxer was, as you said, the sponsor of what's known as the FACE Act, Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, which kind of shut down the Operation Rescue, mayhem in front of abortion clinics that had been going on for years. You could pass a federal right to abortion law. Why the heck not? That lies within Congress's commerce power to pass such a law. You could repeal the Hyde Amendment that for 40 years now has kept federal money from under Medicaid from paying for abortions for women who can't afford them. So, I would just encourage people to think proactively instead of just, crying in our tea over this prospect, to say, okay, what can we do? And I think there's going to be a lot we can do. So that's my word on that.
Kim, do you want to pick up?
Yeah, I agree with Linda's assessment that Roe v. Wade as a constitutional standard for reproductive rights is in jeopardy. And so the solution for those who want to preserve reproductive rights lie elsewhere. It lies in Congress. It certainly lies in state houses. There are states for which the laws will not change because there are strong laws within those states that support those rights, and it will become a state's issue. I think if you look at it from a political point of view, I think one thing that Democrats who want to protect reproductive rights have done wrong is allow Republicans to frame this as a quote unquote killing babies situation. Think about it. Under Obamacare, the number of abortions performed in the United States went down because the access to contraception increased. And if your goal is to reduce the number of abortions being done, that was actually one policy that affected that. All these attempts, these state rules trying to restrict access to abortion have not done that. It's just made abortion more dangerous. And if you also, rules that talk about economic equality, a lot of reasons that women consider this is because they don't have the economic ability to handle a growing family. And if you change the laws to give them a greater economic ability, then again, the number of unwanted pregnancies will go down and it will solve your problem. And I think if Democrats not only legislate and act in that way, but speak and talk about that in that way, I wrote a column about it's a shame that Democrats have allowed Republicans to take the issues of patriotism and faith as if it's their own. There are a lot of faithful Democrats who don't want people to have abortions, and they want solutions that actually work to fix it. And the ones that we've seen actually working are the ones that have been enacted by Democrats. So I think that is one way to try to protect that right if the court isn't going to do it.
I read that piece, and sorry, Linda, go ahead.
I was just going to underscore something that Kim said, that the demographics of who gets abortions has changed quite notably in recent years and moved further and further down the socioeconomic scale, because with long-lasting, reliable contraception that's been available to upper middle class women, and through Obamacare available to everybody who's covered by an employer health plan, it really is working. So she's exactly right. To the extent that we view abortion as a problem, we know from our behavior in society how to decrease the numbers.
I appreciate you broadening it just from, does Roe get overturned, or does it essentially become a hollow promise because undue burden is really the standard, and the court can just say, well, nothing's an undue burden. And to talk about, putting this really important question in context. And I I know that you both have about 4 more minutes. So let's do the last kind of bucket of questions had to do with, it's called court packing, but I think we should say for the audience, what we really mean is increasing the number of members of the Supreme Court. And Tim, just to let you know, you were on for a second. Kim, I'll start with you because I started with Linda last time.
Yeah.
Do you think it's realistic that we will increase the number of Supreme Court justices? And do you think that it's wise?
There's been a clamor, certainly a clamor for it, especially in response to this hypocritical stance that Mitch McConnell has taken about stalling a Supreme Court justice. I personally don't think that it's wise. I think the last time that was attempted, it didn't work out so well after with FDR in an attempt to protect his New Deal policy. But I think as somebody who has watched the court as a lawyer, someone for whom the court is very important to me, I think by protecting it, the way to protect it and the way to reform it is not to make it even more political and to bring even more politics into it, because then where does it end? If the Democratic president adds, 4 seats to the court, then the next Republican president will add more and it will never end. And then the people will just continue to lose trust in it. There are proposed solutions that have bipartisan support, like a long-term limit, 18 years, something that ensures that every president gets to pick a Supreme Court justice. I wasn't in favor of that before because I thought, okay, well, if it's like a calendar, a Supreme Court vacancy is coming up, that just injects automatic politics into the process. But how far it's broken and where we are now says to me, you know what, that's better than what we have now. So perhaps that's a solution that can be vetted out. But I think increasing the number, changing the court, and really just showing that the Congress can politicize another branch is not a way to instill confidence in the court.
I had the same evolution on term limits, and I have the same feeling about expanding the court, which is you have to be careful because it's like the filibuster. You really like it if you're a minority.
Right.
But Linda, I didn't mean to speak during your time. So I would like to hear your views on expanding the number of Supreme Court justices. And then what Kim brought up, which is this issue of term limits. And then we probably have to, unfortunately, end the night there.
Yeah, I'm agnostic actually on the so-called court packing. I hadn't taken it very seriously, but I certainly understand the impulse. There's going to be 2 stolen seats. One that should have gone to Merrick Garland and the other that should have gone to whoever's elected, whichever president's elected on November 3rd. And I get it, and I also get the slippery slope argument. The pendulum will swing, and if we have 11 justices this time and then 13, and then, pretty soon we'll have an army of Supreme Court justices. So I don't know. I'm going to take a ringside seat to this and just very interested in it. Term limits, I'm pretty much there, but that's not going to solve the immediate problem. You see, the court packing responds to the fact that we're going to be having for a generation now a court that's been constructed in this way. We're going to have a majority of the court, 5 members, who've been put there by presidents who did not have a majority vote, a majority of the popular vote. That's a problem. That's really a problem. And term limits, that's a long-term solution, because you're not going to, whether you think you can do it by legislation, which some people think, or it's going to take a constitutional amendment, which is years and years, you're not going to abrogate the terms of the sitting justices. So that's, almost more in the nature of a thought experiment at this point. So that's my slightly inconclusive but very engaged view of this matter.
Very engaged and very educated. Kim and Linda, thank you so much for spending the evening with us, for talking about Justice Ginsburg, for talking about her jurisprudence. and for helping us to understand the Supreme Court as an institution and what we might see moving forward. I personally would love to make this the first of 5 hours, but I promised both of you I'd go. So with that, what's going to happen is I'm going to say on behalf of everybody, thank you for spending your evenings with us. And the Hammer Forum is now going to play us off, and feel free to click leave the meeting. But thank you so much, Linda, and thank you so much, Kim, again.
Thank you.
Thank you.